This is Good Ideas, Great Results by MothMothhMothhh, read by Satori Reed. Summary. Midoriya has the questionable idea to offer to deliver a piece of work to UA after his online friend forgets to. Nezu is more than happy to meet him. In which, Midoriya breaks into a secure heroics school, bonds with the principal over a comic, and gets both a father and a brother figure out of it. Considering the fact that Iida was Midoriya's first friend in roughly a decade, he thought it was rather understandable that he'd be willing to travel across Japan for the boy. He'd received a message from the teenager stating that they'd forgotten to pass over a piece of work from one of his classmates, and, near instantly, Midoriya had offered to deliver it. It didn't matter that Iida lived several hours away, nor that Midoriya would just have to head back to Musutafu to deliver the work, simply that his friend was in need, and Midoriya was able to help. Iida handed over his address with the same level of internet safety one may expect from a newborn child, or perhaps an inebriated kitten, and Midoriya knocked on the window, hanging upside down from something, to collect the student's work. Despite his efforts, he still managed to set off the Iida house alarm system. Iida simply told his family it was a large tanuki that had snuck over the fence. Midoriya managed to escape relatively unscathed, carefully making his way towards the nearest train station. After entering the crowded vehicle, he just managed to nick a seat from one of his ex-classmates who'd been unfortunate enough to stand for a mere second. He smiled innocently at the teenager's outraged expression, unable to speak at the risk of drawing attention. Midoriya thought it was a fair payback for the crime of teasing another student for their quirk. He pulled out his phone as the boy trudged past to find another seat, an endeavor that was impossible in nature, sending a confirming message that his plan was going as well planned to Iida. The teenager, again, thanked him profusely, apologizing for overusing his quirk previously that day. This was the only reason he had not returned to UA himself. Midoriya intelligently responded with an image of a cat with an edited thumbs-up emoji. Instead of risking any further social interaction, the teenager took the sensible option of simply staring at the halted conversation on his phone screen until his stop was called out. With the remnants of his energy, the teenager stood, stepping out of the train, and backed into Musutafu. Journeying to his dream school was less nerve-wracking than Midoriya anticipated, although the realization was ill-timed, considering the fact that he was about to enter without a proper identification card. Ever the genius, however, Midoriya had already planned for that, whipping out a fake mustache from his inner pocket and pasting it on his face before approaching the educational building. The boy was only waiting outside for a few minutes before a teacher came out to investigate, somehow appearing more fatigued than Midoriya felt. Not even attempting to deepen his voice, Midoriya told the man he was there to upgrade the heating system, raising a hand to adjust his cap before realizing he'd instead spent his remaining yen on beef jerky to leave for the principal as an apology. His hand returned to his side, and the teenager valiantly attempted to not violently explode with embarrassment. With nothing less than miraculous luck, the teenager had been mid-blink during his shameful moment, missing it entirely. The knowledge that no one witnessed his incompetence was the only thing preventing Midoriya from bursting into tears. Nobody could have blamed him if he had. The adult pressed his identity card against the blinking light twice, beckoning Midoriya in. Near immediately, he left the teenager to his own devices, and Midoriya made a mental note to bring up the concerningly low level of security to Nezu via a post-it note. He strolled through the school, taking his directions from the rather helpful maps located around the building. It didn't take long before the determined student managed to find the principal's office, cautiously pushing the door open with his fingertips. Much to his surprise, no lasers or flamethrowers instantly incinerated him, and he appreciated that thoroughly. Mindful of any possible traps to capture intruders such as himself, Midoriya tiptoed to the desk slowly. Arriving unscathed, he pulled the piece of paper from his backpack, slipping it directly in front of the mammal's chair. Once he'd given himself a moment to breathe, he found himself rather curious with what lay on the aforementioned desk. The first thing to catch his eye was an ink stamp, almost certainly for students with impressive grades. Risking his cover, he picked it up, handling it as one might imagine an archaeologist handling the Holy Grail. Looking around, as if for a being who spawned out of thin air, he carefully stamped it against the back of his hand. The image was of a cartoon raccoon sticking out a thumbs up. The hand was that of a human. Midoriya imagined that no matter what precautions he took, Nezu would be aware of his visit. So he turned on the principal's computer, staring at the empty password box for a moment before simply entering the word password. The computer granted him access. Whilst waiting for the device to load, he placed the beef jerky he'd bought on the desk for the hero to find later. He made sure to research what the teacher was most likely to enjoy beforehand. A rather unflattering photo of Nezu loaded on the computer's screen, taken from above and distorting his face in a rounding manner. Midoriya blinked owlishly at the jump scare he'd been subjected to. With more hesitance than previously, the teenager opened up the mammal's internet browser and began typing an explanation. Now, Midoriya wasn't usually a curious being, with the exception of the entire topic of quirks and perhaps heroes too. That, however, didn't mean that he didn't want to know why. Why? Nezu had recently searched for how to show your teachers you appreciate them, how to hack to hero commission and erase a hero's rank, how to remove infestation of Eraserhead's haters, and, most concerningly out of all, full breakdown of Endeavor's security system plus how to override please. Midoriya believed that he was owed a medal for blatantly ignoring the past searches in favor of his little explanation. Halfway through his small paragraph, he paused suddenly, ceasing all movement and instead opting to listen to his surroundings. As he suspected, there was a scrabbling sound coming from the door to the office. He briefly contemplated perhaps hiding or jumping out of the nearby window. This thought process took more time than expected, and he was caught with one leg out of the window by Nezu himself. He stared at the hero for a second, 2 seconds, a third second for luck, before attempting to slide the rest of his body out of the window. That was, of course, before he caught the sight of what the mammal was reading. Holy fuck, is that eraser of crime? Before deciding not to apply for UA, Midoriya had fallen deep into a rabbit hole of underground heroics, following along with the few images and video snippets he could locate online religiously. It was several months into his interest that he discovered Eraser of Crime, a comic focused on the underground hero Eraserhead. It was detailed, yet left out any information that could be linked to the actual hero that had inspired it. The writer, a simple bar owner in Camino. Midoriya had never found another soul interested in the comic, other than a rather excited fan online who seemed a bit too focused on the protagonist's muscles. This, he thought, counted as a monumental moment in history. Damn, I love that series. Who's your favorite character? He crawled, with a little struggle, back into the room, tugging his hoodie from the handle out of the window. Completely ignoring the fact that there was a teenager intruding on his property with access to his computer, Nezu grinned wildly. I'd consider myself a fan of both the Yellow Scarf and the Soundweaver. Midoriya laughed. Of course, considering the fact that you told them after all. Nezu raised the fur that would have been his eyebrow if he were human. And your favorite? I think I'm rather fond of most of the main cast, although I probably favor Kitchatif. Nezu nodded thoughtfully. Ah, yes, Detective Sansa, wonderful man. Midoriya leaned forward, excitement brimming over the edge of his mortal form. You've met him? What are they like? He lowered his voice to a whisper. Do they really purr? Nezu struggled onto the table, scrabbling for footholds until he managed to sit on the desk. Well, he's very good at his job. He purrs quite a lot, especially when they're right about things. He can be smug though. Midoriya placed his hands on the edge of the desk, as if about to disclose redacted information. Do you have their autograph? Without a word, Nezu kicked open one of the drawers on the side of the furniture, whipping out a piece of paper with an inky paw print and what Midoriya suspected was a stamp of the officer's nose. He raised an eyebrow. What else you got? Those 4 words opened the floodgates, unleashing a torrent of signed papers and custom-made figurines. When Midoriya did eventually make it home, it was with much more paper than he'd left with, and several sheets of raccoon stickers. Shortly after his reappearance, Inko received an email from none other than Nezu himself, explaining what had happened with a date of meeting to discuss her boundaries and what kind of split custody arrangements she'd be okay with, if any. A mere week later, Iida knocked on the door of the principal's office, waiting for a moment before entering the room. Nezu was seated next to Midoriya, ear switching with focus as he carefully stuck what appeared to be a 12th raccoon sticker onto the teenager's hoodie, splitting his attention between that task and his son's hero card that the boy was proudly showing to him. Inko sat by the window, carefully sketching out the scene before her, with love bleeding into each movement of her pencil. Iida-kun, please take a seat, Nezu called, indicating to the free chair on the other side of Midoriya. Inko had left that space completely blank in her drawing, as if awaiting his arrival. Aizawa glanced into the office, staring blankly at the homeless scene in front of him before gagging into his coffee cup and scurrying away. So this was Good Ideas, Great Results by MothMothhMothhh, read by Satori Reed. Thank you for listening, and thank you to the author for letting me read this, and see you later.